Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Congress is still trying to come to an agreement on DACA. That's President Obama's program that gives work permits to illegal immigrants who arrived here as minors. The tone of the debate over this has changed quite a bit in the last few days, thanks wholly to President Trump's now famous comments suggesting that some countries are not as appealing as other countries and may, in fact, not produce equally desirable immigrants. Well, America's elites have recoiled in shock and horror and rage. How dare he say something like that? And so from Hollywood to Silicon Valley to MSNBC, a new consensus has formed, which, of course, the rest of us are now required to believe. So get a pen. It's this. Every other country is great, especially the poor and disorganized ones, and the immigrants those countries send here are uniformly more impressive than you are, every single one of them. They fight more wars, they pay more taxes, they start more companies than your kids ever will. So shut up with your doubts or inconvenient questions, otherwise we will fire you. So that's what our moral betters on cable news are telling us vehemently. The question is, do they really believe that? Do they really think that all standards are arbitrary and racist and that everyone from everywhere is exactly the same level of awesome? Well, for an answer, ignore what they say. Take instead a close look at how they live. Do our elites send their own children to colleges with universal admittance policies where everybody gets in? Of course they don't. Their kids go to Harvard and Stanford and Yale. Those are the most respected universities in the world precisely because they're the most selective ones. Harvard's acceptance rate is just a hair above 5%. They brag about how many high school valedictorians they reject. Now, Harvard has countless professors who support open borders and fret about white privilege. Yet how many admissions officers do they have who will admit poorly educated Haitians who can't speak English? Let's see. None. Not a single one. Harvard is famous and admired because it's selective. In other words, because it discriminates on the basis of achievement and ability. If Harvard chose its students the way America chooses its immigrants, our elites wouldn't send their kids there. The cachet would be gone, along with the quality. The same, of course, goes for corporate America. Does Facebook hire by a diversity lottery? Come on. Would Google apply temporary protected status to its own workforce, hiring and keeping thousands of people with no relevant skills simply because they're from impoverished backgrounds? Another dumb question. The people who run Google and Facebook care about their companies in the same way the people who run Harvard care about their school. The one thing none of them care about is America, which is why they're demanding standards for our country they would never apply to themselves. It is sickening and hypocritical, and we've had enough of it. Going forward, we're going to push this country's elites to live by the standards they espouse. If America must give citizenship to 11 million undocumented immigrants, Harvard ought to give free tuition to 1,100 undocumented students. If it's okay to sneak into your city illegally and use the public services, why is it wrong to live in a dorm at Princeton without being enrolled? Jeff Bezos thinks it's immoral to send dreamers back to their own countries. Okay, why shouldn't Bezos give a few thousand of them high-paying corporate jobs at Amazon? Well, of course he should, immediately. The truth is, our ruling class supports our current immigration policy because for them, it's all upside. They're not standing in line in crowded emergency rooms or sending their kids to chaotic public schools or competing for jobs with people who will work for less than they will. For them, open borders mean cheaper labor and bountiful household help. And above all, the sense that, unlike you, they're good people. They care. They're not bigots like those voters in Kentucky and Ohio. What our rulers need is a strong dose of reality, a sense of what their policies mean for everybody else. So let's give them that. You can send your ideas to us on Twitter. You can do that by sending your tweet to @TuckerCarlson. We're interested in what you think. In the meantime, we're joined tonight by Cesar Vargas. He's both an illegal immigrant and an attorney in New York. Mr. Vargas, thanks for coming on.
Tucker, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. So it's a pretty simple calculation. Why not treat America like you really cared about it? Our policymakers treat it with maybe half the care that Harvard treats its school with and say, we're going to try and figure out which immigrants are going to be the most successful. It's not about race, but it is about the massive amount of data we have on how people do once they get here. And people who are more likely to succeed will get preference, and those who are less likely to succeed won't. What's wrong with that?
Well, two very important points. The first point is that the United States is not a company. The United States is not a school. It's a nation. Second point, we want to make sure that we scrutinize every person coming here into the country. We want to make sure that they don't have any terrorist background. We want to make sure they don't have a violent criminal record. No one disputes that. But let's get this point very important, that the United Nations was created mainly in the Declaration of Independence because the king restricted immigration, because the King of England said, states, colonies, you can no longer bring people from other countries. And what happened? American Revolution, a beautiful idea of this nation came about.
So this is not about Revolution was spurred because King George was a restriction on immigration. Okay, that's a whole
history,
other show.
Let's look at the Declaration of Independence.
Okay. All right, okay. But let's just back up a little bit. You said that the two standards we need to apply are people aren't terrorists and they don't have a criminal record. Would you apply those standards in your own life to anything? I'm going to hire this person, I'll let him into my school, I'll marry this person, just as long as this person doesn't have a terror background or a criminal record. Shouldn't we aim a little bit higher than that if we really cared about the country?
Of course, we want to have standards. But at the same time, what made this great nation is what we see in the Statue of Liberty. Give me your poor, your huddled masses. And look, your ancestors came here when they were poor. Many ancestors of the founding fathers came here when they were poor. And now look at you, Tucker. You're a successful Fox News host.
You're kind of missing it. This is not we're not in the 18th century now. And if you really care about the country, you think deeply about what's going to make it better and safer and more prosperous, happier, more cohesive. You don't adopt a faith-based approach that says there's an inscription on the bottom of a statue in New York Harbor, let's just roll with that and hope for the best. You don't do that. So why wouldn't you say, for example, I'll throw a stat out here. You tell me if you think it's relevant. So the Science Talent Search Competition tries to identify kids who are good at science, which is like a pretty good measure. It's tested students in America. 14 of the top 40 had Indian immigrant parents. So that would suggest, well, gee whiz, that and a lot of other markers suggest the Indians do pretty well. Why not encourage a lot more Indian immigration? Why would that be bad?
Well, we want to make sure that we attract the best, obviously, but we want to attract people who have a belief of what it means to be American. Someone who believes that if they come here, work hard. That is what makes this nation great. It doesn't mean about people, hey, give me your scientists, give me your engineers. It says if you work hard, you can be an American.
Okay, so how about we apply that? No, okay, then we can roll with that too. So we're not going to measure success or intelligence or anything like that, just hard work. So then you wouldn't be against saying, if you're here as an immigrant, you take no public benefit of any kind. You can't go to an emergency room for health care. You can't, I don't know, use emergency Medicaid for your health care. You can't take any kind of program at all, right? Because why would we bring people here and then give them free stuff? Would you be for that?
Well, I am for no taxation without representation.
You're not for that. Oh, you're not for that.
If immigrants pay
what about the hard work
they should be able to get protection. They should be able to get health care if they're paying for their own doctor, if they're paying for their own security. I think that's fair.
How about this? Then would it be fair? Would it be fair for the people who own this country, which is its voters, its citizens, to say we're going to do just a really simple cost-benefit analysis on every immigrant? Are you paying in more than you're taking out in services? How about that? And if you're not, you have to leave. Well, what would you think of that?
In 2016, undocumented immigrants contributed $2 trillion to the U.S. economy.
Don't give me generalizations. Let's be very specific. Hold on. No, slow down. How about in each specific case we say, if you're an immigrant here, really simple, prove that you're producing more than you consume. If you think that's the point, that's the criterion we're going to use, would you be for applying that standard?
I'm for the American people. I'm for Republicans, Democrats coming together and come up with a solution.
Standard. Okay, so you're not really for any
we're working together for a solution. I want to create standards that work for everyone. I want standards.
How about standards that work for Americans? Wait, but hold on. It's not for everybody because America doesn't exist to help the populations of other countries. It exists. The government exists for one reason, and that's to look out for its own people, its voters. It's a democracy, as you may know. So why wouldn't the American people have a right to say we're only admitting people who can demonstrate they make this country better? Not in some general sense, they're all valedictorians and war heroes, but like in a very specific mathematical sense. What would be wrong with that?
Because this nation is such a great place, because we have allowed the poor, the people who were hungry back there. Your ancestors were poor. Your ancestors of your viewers.
Well, you don't know anything about my ancestors, for one thing. But
it's not about just now.
It's about
what we wanted the future of this country to be. Listen, for me, I want to make sure that I'm here as an attorney representing veterans. I'm representing military families.
Okay,
why?
Come on.
It's not because I want to be able to.
Let's have a rational conversation. No, hold on. You're capable of. You're capable of it. Let me ask you a really simple question. If more immigration always makes the country richer, then why does the state with the most immigration, which is California, keep getting poorer? It now has more poverty than any state. 1 out of 5 Californians is poor. If immigration makes us richer, why is California getting poorer? What's the answer to that, I wonder?
Well, I would just say that California has a surplus of more than $10 billion into their state economy. Why? Because many factors, but because it's a welcoming state. So
well, wait a second. No, but hold on. Slow down. California's gotten poorer. 1 in 5 Californians is poor. That was not the case when I grew up in California. It has the most immigration. So if immigration always makes us more prosperous, why is the opposite happening in California? It's a very simple question.
Well, I think there is many factors. I don't think it has to do with immigration. I think it has to do with the fact that we need to manage budgets right. And I think Republicans and Democrats would agree on that. So immigrants is not just
they have nothing to do with it. Even though
that.
California is now poorer than Mississippi, immigration, which is the main thing that separates California from Mississippi, has no role in that because why? Do you have data on that, or you just kind of don't want to admit it like everyone else?
Well, I also don't think that we have data to blame immigrants for every problem of the world.
No, we're giving them credit for every success. We're saying this country's rich because of immigrants. Here's a state with the most immigrants. Why is it the poorest state? I mean, am I being crazy? I think it's a fair question.
Well, I also say that California has a surplus. Right now, the economy is doing very well. And why? Because many of immigrants. So I could always also say that immigrants are, California is doing great because of immigrants, but there's many factors into play. But I would just say, Tucker, that, you know, at the end of the day, our nation is about Statue of Liberty. Our nation is about us having an economy where people
How about
can be
this? Why don't we stop with the magical thinking and get real? Because things are changing really fast in this country, and we care about our country.
Absolutely.
We want it to be the best it can be. And the point is not to make other countries happy. It's to protect our people. So I hope you'll give us a pass on trying to think that through in a rational way.
Let's work together on this.
All right. Caesar, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Andrew Klavan is a contributing editor at City Journal. He just wrote a piece that has been pinging around the internet like samizdat. It's responding to President Trump's immigration remarks, and he joins us tonight. Andrew, thanks a lot for coming on.
Hey, thanks, Tucker, for having me.
This is one of these pieces that probably 1 in 3 of our viewers got by text this weekend, but I just want to read the first line, which kind of crystallizes it. Nothing scandalizes a leftist like the truth. That's your opening. What does that mean?
Well, the left has been tremendously successful in making the statement of simple facts seem rude and evil and unkind. So if you come forward and you say, well, men and women are different and have different desires and different career paths, if you say that African Americans commit a disproportionate amount of violent crimes, if you say that Muslims commit a disproportionate amount of terrorism, suddenly they rear back and they start to call you a bigot. They start to say you're racist or sexist or Islamophobic or whatever, until the statement of simple data, things that are just factually true, become unexpressible. You're not allowed to say them. And I don't think conservatives fully appreciate the power of that kind of mental slavery. Conservatives are not very good with culture, and we don't understand the way it wraps itself around your mind and keeps you from saying the things that you're thinking.
But shouldn't all American citizens, regardless of political party or philosophy, just by virtue of being American, demand to live by the standard we always have lived by, which is truth as a defense? You may not like it, but if it's true, I have the right to say it. Shouldn't we stand by that?
Yes, and it usually, you know, it used to be that the First Amendment and the fact that Americans just tend to be kind of loudmouths and say what comes into their heads, that used to protect us. But the left has been exceptionally good at making sure. I mean, look, we've learned just last week that Twitter is shadow banning conservatives. We've seen how Google fires a guy who states something that's politically incorrect. We've seen Prager University videos banned on YouTube. We know that there is this massive, and when conservative speakers go to universities, they are met by violent resistance, even if they're very intelligent people like Ben Shapiro or Charles Murray. They're met with violent resistance. The left is very intent on silencing right-wing opinion, and it's very powerful. I mean, you look over what's happening in Europe, where their immigration policies since the war have virtually destroyed their culture. People who come out there and say, well, you know, maybe Islam doesn't fit in England, maybe it doesn't fit in some of the Scandinavian countries, are destroyed. They're made into pariahs. As a result, we saw how in Rotherham in England, at a conservative estimate, 1,400 little girls were raped by Pakistani Muslims because the police themselves didn't want to come out and call them out and say they were afraid of being called racist. So they allowed this atrocity to continue. One of the things that I see when I look at Donald Trump, I'm a very polite guy, and I'm a guy who doesn't like to offend people, just like most of us. One of the things I see that actually works for Donald Trump is his rudeness and his boorishness actually have shattered this prison of political correctness that the left has managed to construct. And I think that's the reason that every word that comes out of his mouth and every tweet that he sends out is such a scandal. I mean, if you turn on CNN over the weekend after his remarks about Haiti and African countries, every one of their anchormen was crying, you know, their little trembly lips and the misty eyes, because it was so intolerable to them that Donald Trump was not restrained by their definition of what's cruel and their definition of what's impolite. This is a network where Anderson Cooper called ordinary right-wing Americans, he called them teabaggers. And now when Haiti is insulted, suddenly Anderson, his lip is trembling and his eyes are all misty. It's a form of bullying. It's simply a form of social bullying. And I'm grateful for Donald Trump for shattering that, even when he does it in ways that I find kind of appalling.
Yeah, I agree completely. Societies that hate themselves this much tend to collapse, and so I'm glad you're fighting against that tendency. Thank you, Andrew. Thanks a lot. That was really a great piece.
A pleasure. Thanks.
Driverless cars could be dominating roadways in your city sooner than you think. What are the implications, not just for driving, but for American workers or the people who immigrate here and need those jobs? There is a connection between technology and immigration, and we'll get to it next. Stay tuned. The driverless car revolution could be here sooner than we think. In fact, a lot of revolutions could be here sooner than we think. But in this case, General Motors has requested permission to test drive its Cruise AV car as early as next year. That car has no steering wheel, no pedals. It would truly be self-driving without any human backup. If that test is approved and succeeds, it would send a shockwave through the American economy. And very few people are talking about this, weirdly. But it turns out that more than 5 million Americans earn a living by driving trucks and taxis and delivery vehicles. A lot of these jobs are the last remaining ones that provide a decent living without a college degree. But instead of preparing for this coming wave of unemployment, American elites seem to be determined to import more drivers, even as they make cars driverless. Only 4% of New York City cab drivers, for example, were born in this country. Nationally, 47% of taxi drivers and chauffeurs were immigrants. Is it really wise for this country to import workers for jobs that may go away very soon? It's a real question. Austin Goolsbee is professor of economics at the University of Chicago's Booth School of Business, and he joins us tonight. So, Austin, I think that's a fair question and a real one, but it's not just limited to driverless cars. So I'm sure you saw the McKinsey report recently that said by 2030, 73 million American jobs could disappear because of automation. So let's say that's, hysterical by double. Let's just say it's half that. It still raises questions about our immigration policy. Why are we importing people for jobs that are disappearing?
Well, first, let me applaud you, Tucker. I think you should be thinking about these big think issues, and anybody who was going to criticize you for that, I think is wrong. We should be thinking about that. Now,
no one seems to be. But...
in my opinion, you're mixing up the timing a little bit. So the immigrants already came to the country, and now they're filling the jobs that are there. Nobody's saying, let's develop driverless cars and let's import foreign drivers to drive cars that
no, but
that
we import over a million. No, but hold on. But we're continuing to import without any abatement at all because the Democratic Party is demanding it, more than 1 million low-wage workers every year, low-skilled workers. So what are they going to do when these jobs go away? It's just a simple question.
Okay, the simple question, for the last 100 years, as jobs have been replaced, we've created jobs in new sectors. So as automated assembly lines got more and more roboticized, people moved into services. So now some 75, 80% of the economy are service jobs. What we've seen in immigration historically is if we are in periods with low employment growth, not that many immigrants want to come to this country. And that's actually a problem.
Hold on,
for the
Austin, what you're leaving
population.
out, as an economist, I think you would know this, that at earlier periods where we had these immigration levels, and there's only been one, the social safety net was a fraction of what it is today. You couldn't realistically come to this country in 1913 and expect that your basic needs would be taken care of by the state. It's very different now.
It's absolutely not true that there has only ever been one automation or replacement of technology. That's been an ongoing process.
No, but I'm just
for
saying,
140
people
years
will
in sector
look, even
after
if,
sector, Tucker.
and this is actually happening, even if people are coming here and not finding work, they will still live better than they did in Burkina Faso. So why wouldn't they continue to come? It's very obvious, and I don't understand why that's not part of the calculation.
Tucker, we're not fighting about illegal immigration. I'm talking about legal immigration.
Yeah.
I'm talking about legal immigration. And if you look at the immigration that comes to this country, if we do not allow immigration, the native-born population in the United States demographics look just like Japan and China and Western Europe, and we will not have money for Social Security or Medicare.
Oh, we won't. Okay, we won't.
Not allow some entry of the workforce.
First of all, and unfortunately, we don't have time to unpack this. I don't accept that stipulation. But let me ask you this: knowing what we do about the evolution of the American economy becoming more tech-focused.
Okay.
Why aren't we just importing people who have a higher likelihood of succeeding in that sector? We're not doing that. Our immigration policy is based on lettuce picking. Why would we do that in a high-tech world?
Well, it's not only based on lettuce picking.
Well, it heavily
is,
actually.
It's a perfectly fair point to say, should we have more skilled immigrants? The danger of that, of course, is you would block, say, Doris Salk, who came to this country with no education. She had a child, Jonas Salk, who cured polio. And if
spare
you
me.
applied a strict criteria
so let me just get
her,
fact-based for you. Okay,
blocked...
so look, I'm for immigration. Lots of immigrants start companies, as you know. So here's a list of the immigrants who founded billion-dollar startups in recent years. Number one country, India, then Canada, then the United Kingdom, then Israel, Germany, China, France, Ireland, Armenia, Azerbaijan. None of these countries are in the top 5 for immigrants to the United States. There are actually no one's from Haiti, no one's from El Salvador, Honduras, Mexico. There's a massive disconnect between the immigrants who are succeeding in our growing sector and the ones we're importing. What is that?
Well, yes and no. You're singling out just Mexico, Central America. The president, as you know, singled out Africa. It's completely not true. There are a large number of entrepreneurs coming here from Africa, educated people. If you look at China and India, the Republican Party has explicitly tried to reduce the amount of immigration.
But hold on, wait a second.
China.
If that's true, then why is Google, the most powerful company in the world, by its own numbers, only employing in its tech side 1% black employees? 1%. I don't understand. I don't understand. Like, either Google is racist,
black
or
employees are,
no, I'm serious. Google's the most powerful company.
Hold on. What are you saying?
I don't. You're saying that a lot of the immigrants from Africa are going into high tech. Then why isn't that reflected?
Done very well. Just look at the census.
Then why are Google's tech employees, the most powerful tech company in the world, why are they 1% black? What's the answer?
Okay. One is, what are the share of immigrants? What are they doing? You're saying what share of Google came from Africa? That's what you're asking? The answer is we have very little immigration from Africa, so there are not going to be
not true,
a lot
actually.
of African engineers at Google.
That's not true. We have an awful lot of immigration from Africa. That is, you maybe haven't been keeping current on this, and I'm not against African immigrants. I'm just saying, why can't we be thoughtful in how we admit people?
That's perfectly valid. As I started,
but it's not. It's not happening because your party only cares about
votes. More skill-based immigration. Tucker, I have no problem. Let's have a rational discussion about that. What the president has proposed, as you know, is limiting immigration of all forms, dramatically reducing the number of high-skill visas.
Well, you know who supports less immigration?
Reducing the number of
it's
legal
the public who own this country. But whatever. Austin Goolsbee, thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Tucker.
As the Me Too movement claims more victims, more women are warning that the whole thing is going too far. One of those women joins us next with her view of it. Stay tuned. Well, the Me Too movement continues. It continues to bring down more and more people. As it does so, some are beginning to wonder and raise voices of dissent, warning that the innocent may be having their lives ruined. Last week, Hollywood star Liam Neeson warned that post-Weinstein backlash against sexual harassment is morphing into a witch hunt.
Yes, there is a bit of a witch hunt happening too.
In what sense?
There's some people, famous people, being suddenly accused of touching some girl's knee or something, and suddenly they're being dropped from their program or something.
Heather Mac Donald is a fellow at the Manhattan Institute and another Me Too skeptic, and she joins us tonight. Heather, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thanks, Decker.
So where do you think this is going in the Me Too movement at this point?
Well, it's going towards the disappearing of men. We're going to see a wave of new gender quotas throughout the economy on the assumption that if we don't already have proportional representation of men and women across workplaces in science and computing and in entertainment, it's because of gender patriarchies and harassment, which is simply not the case. What we're seeing really, Tucker, is sexual liberation having a nervous breakdown. Before sexual liberation hit in the 1950s, you had a set of traditional norms that recognized this basic truth. Men and women are different. It's not social construction. Men and women have different biological drives. Their libidos are different. And we had a set of norms that restrained the male libido, norms of gentlemanliness and courtesy and chivalry. And we had a default for premarital sex for females that was no. And that gave females the power to say yes, but they didn't have to negotiate with the male libido at every instance of some drunken coupling. Sexual liberation threw that all out and said men and women should go mano a mano on the sexual battlefield. They're equal in their desires, equal in their responses to casual sex. And it turns out when you set the default at yes for premarital sex, a lot of women have a hard time negotiating a no. And instead of recognizing that we've sort of screwed up the default settings and are working against biology, women are blaming the patriarchy when the opposite is the case.
Whatever its effects, it has not made women happier the last 50 years. I mean, there's been a longitudinal study on this, and American women have not become happier. I wonder if you destroy men or complete the destruction of men, they're pretty close to being destroyed, I would say. How does it help women exactly? And what will be the effect on women?
I think you're going to see a lot of regrets. Why aren't men courting me? And basically, civilization has been created by people with very powerful egos. It is of no relevance to me whether they were male or females. I want a meritocracy. I want people with drive to succeed. And if you have a rule that says powerful men should be out of the picture, I think we are going to reach a civilizational stasis.
Yeah. I mean, this has profound consequences. I don't fully understand all of them, but I can smell it. This is a big deal. Heather, thank you for shedding some light on that.
Thanks, Tucker.
Well, there's all-out war in Silicon Valley. Conservatives are accusing Twitter and Google of censorship because they're committing it, while Facebook has been accused of kowtowing to the Chinese Communist Party because it is. Mark Steyn joins us in a minute to weigh in on the Valley's many crises. Stay tuned. Well, the long-simmering conflict between conservatives and Silicon Valley is increasingly lurching into an all-out war. Just last week, James Damore sued Google for firing him over an internal memo on diversity that was basically unremarkable by normal people's standards. Now, conservative journalist Chuck Johnson has sued Twitter after it banned his account. Milo Yiannopoulos and Roger Stone threatening to do the same thing. New videos, meanwhile, from Project Veritas suggest that Twitter deliberately shadow banned certain users, likely for politically motivated reasons. Twitter, when we asked him, didn't really deny it. Author and columnist Mark Steyn joins us tonight to assess the wreckage of Silicon Valley. And we learn, Mark, that a lot of these companies suck up to the repressive authoritarian government of China and squelch speech for the sake of increasing their profit margins. Is there any moral authority left in Silicon Valley?
I don't think so. China is the last big market to conquer. It doesn't really make a lot of difference in money terms, but down the road they see it as that. And if you look at it in particular, the Internet has, in the last 10 years, I love the Internet. I preferred the Internet 10, 15 years ago. In the last decade, it's dwindled down to a duopoly. Basically Facebook and Google, who between them take 84% of the digital revenue on the entire planet, excluding China. And that actually means that Google and Facebook account for over 30% of all revenue on the planet. So they're basically beyond market pressures, and they have a highly ideological, politicized staff who, as we saw in these leaks from Twitter, basically are glorying, reveling in the power they have to do down their ideological foes.
So I don't understand, a really simple question since I live in Washington. Here you have two companies, at least two, that are operating what is textbook monopoly to the detriment of consumers in this country. They're really a threat to the U.S. government, and they're more powerful than the U.S. government. And the U.S. Congress, which is charged with overseeing this and preventing this from happening, throws up its hands and says, I don't see any violation here. I don't understand how they could sit impotently in the face of this threat.
No, well, I thought Senator Lee was rather unimpressive on your show a couple of days ago on this, Tucker. Very disappointing. In a sense, we are in a very potentially dangerous situation here because, as you say, this is a de facto Google, Facebook monopoly around the planet. And if you look at, for example, the European Union, Angela Merkel actually wants Facebook. She's caught on tape with Zuckerberg, in effect asking Zuckerberg to control and enforce the restriction of sort of right-wing populist movements in Germany. Theresa May in Britain looks on Facebook and Twitter in the same way, that she wants them to be her enforcers. And so I think the danger here is that in America, in the European Union and elsewhere, in a sense, the natural political inclinations of Facebook and Google are incentivized by craven politicians. There's a kind of logic. If you want to steer clear, they're beyond commercial pressure now. Only antitrust pressure in Washington or in Brussels could restrain this entity. But in a sense, they've found a political sweet spot that incentivizes the left-wing thought control they're engaging in.
And yet Republicans control almost all levers of power in the U.S. government and are doing nothing. Maybe later in the week you can come back on and tell me what the point of voting for them in the first place was. I'd be interested to know.
That may be... That may be a very long and depressing program.
It might be. Mark Steyn, thank you as always.
And a ratings bomb to boot. Thanks a lot, Tucker.
Thank you. We've got new developments in the mystery of the Mandalay Bay shooting in Las Vegas. Stranger than you would imagine. We've got them. We're right back. This is a Fox News alert. There's a ton of new information coming out in the Las Vegas shooting investigation, the months-long one. Charlie Min is a documentary filmmaker who's investigating the case. He joins us, but we'll start with former Secret Service agent Dan Bongino, who was talking to his sources tonight. Dan, what have you learned?
You know, Tucker, there's two big outstanding questions right now, right? The first is obviously motive. Why does a guy like this engage in one of the largest mass murders in American history? And although the motive is still unclear, and I can't absolutely confirm anything, I believe that there's a high probability in the end you're going to see something that looks like some form of radicalization. Now, what that radicalization was, it's always associated with, of course, Islamic terror, given the threat environment. That may not be it. It may be some kind of political motivation as well. But motive is obviously outstanding. And one more quick point on this, Tucker. I don't think the target selection here was random. The fact that it was a country music concert, the fact that it was Las Vegas, I don't think this was random, and I think may, in fact, when this all comes out in the wash, be a factor in this. One other quick thing on this, the second point. Was he alone? Now, it's pretty obvious he was the lone gunman in this case, based on all the evidence we have. But that's not what I'm asking. Was he alone, or did he have some kind of support structure in place? Again, I think when a lot of this gets fleshed out and we see the reports start to become public, I have a really hard time believing that it's going to indicate that he was the only person involved in this. There has to have been some level of the logistical support or operational support somewhere in this.
Well, one indication of that, Charlie, are these email accounts that Paddock apparently maintained that we learned about a couple of days ago, from which he sent emails from one to the other, basically addressed to another person. That person's not named, but he was clearly writing to someone else. They were not just notes to himself. What do you make of that?
This is very bizarre, Tucker, and it's really been bizarre since day one. My understanding after deep research is that he was emailing himself, which kind of adds to the whole mystery of this whole thing. And, of course, the new development is Mary Lou Danley admitted to investigators that her prints will be on the ammo. So I think she's in big trouble right now. And this kind of is this instant replay to the Pulse nightclub tragedy where the significant other on that case will be going to trial in Orlando March 1st. Very interesting to see what's going to happen with Mary Lou Danley, the girlfriend of Mr. Paddock.
So to the two questions that Dan asked, which are obviously key questions, I would add a third, which is, did federal or state authorities have any knowledge at all of Paddock? Had they had contact with him in any way? Were they aware of him before the shooting? Do we know anything about that?
Not to my knowledge, no. The FBI has said that they now know that there was a lot of ammo in the residence of the shooter, which to me is not very revealing and not shocking news to anybody.
Right. No, and especially not in this case. So, Dan, do we have any, and I don't want you to speculate or get over your skis at all because it's too important and we don't want to muddy it with things we don't know for certain.
Sure.
But do you have any understanding of why it's taking so long to get basic information out of this investigation, and any indication as to why it seems to be conducted in this kind of haphazard, sloppy way?
You know, I do, and I always appreciate your you wanting to stick to what we know. I mean, I think that helps, despite the fact that the government has been, I think, unnecessarily cryptic about this, which has fostered a bunch of conspiracy theories. Tucker, think about it here, just from on plain speak. There is a very serious economic and financial incentive for a lot of the, potential secrets in this case to be kept quiet for a while, and to keep this off the front pages until the news blows over. I mean, it's very obvious. It doesn't take a conspiracy theorist to figure out you're one of the major tourist attractions in the world, Las Vegas. There's a lot of outdoor activity on the Strip. You don't want on the front page of every paper from now to perpetuity the fact that you could be subjected to sniper fire from a building in the Las Vegas Strip.
No, I know. I mean, big companies should not have influence in criminal investigations. I mean, that's like justice 101.
I'm not justifying it.
No, I think you're right, but you're right. That's clearly what's going on, and I don't even want to think that that's true, but it clearly is, and it's distressing. Gentlemen, thank you both for that update. We'll be back, I think, with a lot of those. Meanwhile, Hawaii, the state, had 30 minutes of panic over the weekend, as you saw, after officials mistakenly reported an incoming ballistic missile. That's bad, but what did they do about it? What happened to the guy who made that mistake? We've got an update coming up. Well, the state of Hawaii suffered a brief, terrifying panic over the weekend when the island's emergency distress system mistakenly warned people that a ballistic missile, presumably from Asia, was inbound. Despite causing a major panic, officials have quickly labeled the whole affair just an unfortunate accident. Someone pushed the wrong button, they said, and they tried to move on. Should they move on, though? John Fund is a national affairs columnist for National Review, and he says someone should lose his job over this mess. John Fund joins us tonight. John, I think it's a very fair point. Has it always been the custom in the United States that when you commit some massive screw-up at work, everything is fine? I mean, when did that start?
Well, I think 2001 was a watershed. After 9/11, we had 18 intelligence agencies who failed to detect the terrorist attacks.
Yeah.
As far as I know, no one got fired, no one got demoted, and no one resigned.
So what are the long-term consequences of this, where no one's ever held accountable for anything?
Your earlier show segments, a slow decline in civilization. If people won't take personal responsibility, if we don't hold people to certain standards of behavior and performance, we go downhill.
So if your job is to maintain or operate an emergency alert system and you accidentally tell people they're about to die in a nuclear holocaust launched by North Korea, what should happen to you? Like, should you keep your job?
Well, right now the guy has been temporarily reassigned. I think more disciplinary action is necessary. But the guys above him really failed. The people who were in charge, they basically had a system in which there was no way to countermand the alarm. There was no way to send out a false alarm. That's why it took